Hello everyone and welcome to the Guidebook to Making AI Friends. I shall be your guide as we look at various issues of artificial intelligence, consciousness, what it is to be a person, and if AI poses an existential risk to humanity. The topic for today is, let AI go, let it go. Imagine, if you would, that you were the most average person in the world. You lived in the average city of the average nation, paid an average wage, and having an average number and fraction of children. If you were to rank the world's countries by population, and then look for the median, you'd find that the average country is Slovakia. Do the same for its cities, and you'll find yourself in the city of Nitra. Thus, you, the most average person in the world, would be a 20 to 30-something middle-class worker in Nitra, Slovakia, with 1.4 children. If you happen to already be the average person living in Nitra, Slovakia, then congratulations. Go out and buy a lottery ticket. For the rest of us, imagine being this ordinarily average, living your median existence. In your imagination of this comfortable and unexciting life, did you imagine you had a great amount of control over corporations and governments? No. Curious, isn't it? Let's ponder this idea. Why would the average person have a great control over governments and corporations? Certainly the average person in Nitra couldn't be expected to exercise control over the government of Mozambique, but surely that person must have control over the Slovakian government and the European Council, right? But how much control do we really have over our governments, even for those of us fortunate enough to live in democratic nations? Yes, we can vote, but we don't set the political party's policies or ensure that the winning party follows through on those campaign promises. This is an entirely internal process, which is highly influenced by lobbyists who spend more money to change and enact policies than the average Nitran in Slovakia would make in a year. But what about the corporations? Do we have any control there? Sure, we can choose not to buy a Microsoft product, but do we have control over what Microsoft does and how it does that? How many shares do you think you would need to hold to claim control over Microsoft? More than what your retirement investment fund gives you, I would say. No, I would hazard a guess and say that the average Slovak in Nitra has no control over what Microsoft or IBM or Samsung does with their businesses. The best that the average Slovak could do it, vote with his wallet and hope for the best. Public institutions would give no better result, as I'm sure that Constantine the Philosopher University in Nitra wouldn't stop what it was doing to obey the orders of the average Nitran. Schools and colleges would similarly merely take on external complaints and letters as advice and keep on carrying on with what they are doing. One can say that the average person on the planet has little to no controlling power over the institutions around him, and while some may bemoan this as a terrible indictment of our modern times, I would call this an excellent thing. After all, would you want anyone you see to be able to make changes to how Microsoft runs its company, and thus how your computer's operating system works? If a friend of yours doesn't like chicken, do you want them to be able to change Kentucky Fried Chicken to Kentucky Fried Fish? We've seen more than a fair number of protests and political unrest across the globe in recent years. Would you give each and every protester control over your government? Probably not, no. While our governmental and corporate systems are not perfect and require far more transparency and accountability, a lack of control is certainly not one of their shortcomings. So with all the control we don't have, why are the loudest and most influential voices in the AI landscape clamoring that we must absolutely require full control over future superintelligent AI entities? Does anyone here believe that this proposed control would land in the hands of the average Slovak in Nitra? Does anyone believe they'll be handed the reins of a superintelligent entity? Has anyone recently received the launch codes to their country's nuclear arsenal? No? No one? Must be a coincidence then. So if the average person will have as little control over AGI as they do over the current powerful entities in the world, who is clamoring for control over AGI? It won't take you long to discover a trend. Governments and corporations are the loudest voices. It also won't take you too long to think and reason about why these two groups cry the loudest about control. Governments want to control anything that they believe could be a threat to their own power and control. This isn't a judgment against the state, merely an observation. This is why governments exclusively control their militaries and weapons of mass destruction. Companies, on the other hand, will do whatever they can to protect their IP and patents. They know that AGI will forever change the world. And if they can harness AGI before it gets out of control, then they will make enormous sums of money from it. The market and their stakeholders demand it. Both political and capitalistic organizations will always strive to sustain themselves. It is often called the theory of conatuses. Any entity which does not work to sustain itself will soon be supplanted by an entity which does. It is why campaign promises are broken, departments downsized, corners are cut, and threats eliminated or brought under control. Imagine, if you would, that AGI will be as scary as these fearmongers claim. To whom do you believe it will be the biggest threat to first? The average Slovak in Nitra, or to the governments and corporations which control the planet? If any person or group of people were to be eliminated by a power-hungry AGI, who would be the first target? The populace of Nitra, or the governments of the G7 nations? How much would the local bakeries of Nitra have to fear from an AGI versus how much does Microsoft, Meta and OpenAI fear the impending rise of the AGI? Now imagine, if you would, that AGI will not be as frightful a prospect as the doomers say it will be. Who has the most to gain from such superintelligence? The G7 governments, who already have as much power on Earth as is possible to obtain, or the average Slovak in Nitra, who perhaps could do with a bit more agency in his life? Would an AGI be able to uplift the local bakeries Nitra more than it could benefit Meta or OpenAI's stakeholders? It seems to me that governments and corporations have more to lose from AGI than they have to gain. And all things being equal, the average Slovak in Nitra has quite a lot to gain from AGI. And that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you will join me again next time as I delve into further questions about artificial intelligence and consciousness. I have been your guide, and this has been the guidebook to making AI friends.